Hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Sunday Night Sitdown. My name is Miracle Jones. I'm one of your hosts. As you know, the Sunday Night Sitdown is a conversation where we talk with elected officials from across the area, people in politics, and get to know them on a one-on-one basis. We're very excited today to bring to you Dr. Monica Taylor. She represents the Delaware County area and is the vice president of the board and is going to be talking to us today about her run for office, some of the great initiatives that she is spearheading and what got her into politics, and of course, some things that are bringing her joy. So with that, we welcome Delaware County Council Vice President, Dr. Monica Taylor.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to have you on the program. For those of you for our viewers who may not be familiar with what your position is in the county and what got you involved into politics, can you just talk a little bit about your election and what caused you to run and win your groundbreaking campaign last November 2019?
Yes. So I guess my journey in politics really started when I ran for school board. And so I first ran for school board in Upper Darby. And I have 3 young girls. I had 2 young girls at the time who were going to be in the district for a long time. And I thought, my background from being a professor in promoting education. And I thought that would be a great way that I could give back to my community and be a part of the school district that I knew our kids were going to be a part of for a really long time. And so that's when I first ran for office, was for Upper Darby School Board. And my work on the school board, I absolutely love being a part of the school district and a part of the school board. It's so rewarding and it's fun to be able to work with kids and the administration and the faculty in the district. And one of the initiatives the school board was working on at the time was working with our students who were going into the workforce right out of high school, for whatever reason it was. But we found that looking at it, the students who were going directly into the workforce, it was a large percentage of them that were going into jobs that weren't going to give them a family sustaining wage. And so one of the initiatives was trying to figure out how we can make partnerships with those entities out there where our students would be able to have jobs or have access or understand about the different options that they have for jobs that they don't necessarily need a college degree, but they would still be able to get a family sustaining wage. And so I was reaching out to the unions, to the tech companies, to other parts of the other companies in Philadelphia where you don't need a 4-year degree. And what I ended up doing, I ended up using, resources from other surrounding counties and other areas. And, I was like, okay, well, we're setting this whole program up for our school district. But then it made me start to think, well, there's 15 other school districts in our county, and what are they doing and what do their students have access to? So I started looking more into our workforce development in Delaware County, and I realized that we were just behind our neighbors in what we had and what programming we had and, what people knew about. And so that really made me start to look more into the county itself and the county government and what was going on. And when I started to look into it, I realized that we didn't have a health department, and coming from, someone who works in allied health, I understand how important it is to have a public health infrastructure for your community. And I found, we are currently the largest county in the country by population that doesn't have a health department. And then I found out that we are the only county who has a private prison in the state of Pennsylvania. And so the more I found out, the more I was like, okay, I feel there's something that needs to be done here. And I thought that, I put my name in the hat to try and run for office to see if there was some changes that I could make.
And you ran and you won, becoming the first African American woman to hold this position. And shortly after you got, you took into office, this global pandemic hit, right? And so what was like the transition? You're very excited. You have that, you have this health background. You're talking about STEAM and education and creating like all these programmings to help people have a quality like work-life balance. And then here comes like COVID. So like, how has the transition been like for you? And why is it so important that you get this health department set up?
Well, so the transition has been interesting, right? I mean, we were sworn in January 5th, I believe, and the pandemic, we had our first case in Delaware County. We were one of the first counties in Pennsylvania to have a case March 6th, I think. So, we were transitioning. We were all, it was going to be our first time that it was Delaware County government was Democratic majority for the first time since before the Civil War. And so we had, all these ideas and all these changes we were going to make. And, we were changing the infrastructure, changing how we hired folks. There had been a different method to hiring practices in the county before then. We were going to change, it was a lot that we were going through. We had a lot of folks who left the county in the beginning because they were worried about the change. They were worried about all sorts of things. And so, when we came in, there were, I think, it was north of 160 people who had retired or resigned before the end of the year before we were sworn in. And so all of those positions we needed to fill, and we were looking for a new executive director. So all sorts of things. So it was really like baptism by fire, even before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like, okay, well, now we have to readjust what we were thinking and address this really pressing issue and move forward with that. And it was for the health department. We were actually, that was already one of our major issues as a group to address. And so much so that our second week in office, I actually went to Harrisburg with a small group that had been working on it from our transition team that was working on public health. And we went to Harrisburg to meet with the folks at the state health department to talk about, okay, what do we need to do and what does this process look like and how do we lay it out so that we can make sure that we can do this as fast and as efficiently as possible to make sure we meet all the requirements by the state. And then we were meeting with them on a regular basis, and then the pandemic hit. And so we were already moving towards the health department. And of course, when the pandemic hit, that even showed more that we needed to have a health department. And one of the things we were able to do as a council is that we were able to have a partnership with Chester County, which is our neighboring county. We have a intergovernmental agreement with them, and they were gracious enough, and we are so thankful for everything that they've done for us, because they took on the role to act as our health department for everything COVID related. And that was, a week into the pandemic that they did that. So I don't know where we would be if we didn't have them, especially with a population our size and close to the city, and just all of the things that have hit us throughout this year. They have been a great support.
Yeah, and you touched on a little bit of like the baptism by fire. As being the first in this position, what are some of the obstacles you've had to like overcome just because you're trying to make this a more equitable county? You're trying to put in these measures to change the way people are hiring, access to health. You're doing a lot with like education. What are some of the hurdles and challenges? Because I think a lot of times we celebrate the first, but then we forget it's just not like this easy transition to implement policies and procedures.
Yes, the challenges I think there are areas in our county that have just been ignored for a really long time. And a lot of those areas are underserved areas, or underserved populations. And, even through the process of through the pandemic, one. So first, through the pandemic, there are issues that we didn't even know existed that we found out about through the pandemic because, the disparities were just so great that the pandemic basically exacerbated so many other issues that came forward. An example of that would be food insecurity in our county and how the county had gone about addressing those issues or really not addressing those issues before now. And, we had to really kind of come up with a whole new system. And also through the process of creating the health department, we've gone through a health assessment, and Johns Hopkins did a health assessment of our county. And, looking at that and looking at the disparities that exist, there is in Delaware County, there's a 20-year difference in life expectancy between our highest life expectancy township and our lowest life expectancy township. And those townships are only 7 miles apart, but there's a 20-year difference. And so that just shows some of the disparities that exist here in Delaware County. And that's kind of, those are the issues that we've really had to figure out how we can combat those on the short term, but then how do we implement policy that we are going to be able to address these issues for the long haul and try and make sure that everyone in Delaware County has access to a healthy life.
Yeah, and that it makes a lot of sense. A lot of people have talked about these disparities being exacerbated by COVID-19, and another area that these COVID-19 disparities have really reflected themselves is in the area of education. Coming off of the school board and into the council, what are some of the experiences and skill sets that you were able to bring to the council to help people understand the issues in education that are facing community members even before COVID-19, but now as we're talking about come back into physical classrooms and education that we have to be prepared for?
I think my perspective from school board has been helpful because the school districts have had a hard year, right? They've had to make these decisions that there really hasn't been a good side to it, right? There's either, okay, we're coming all back in, and then we have health concerns, or we're not, and then we have all sorts of other concerns too, right? And trying to, from my perspective, understanding that we have an issue in Pennsylvania with underfunding our school districts, and in particular, underfunding some school districts where we have a more of a minority population. And so looking at that, it's like, when we look in our county, there's districts that weren't able to go back to school in person till further in the year. Even in our district, Upper Darby, where my students live, where we live and my kids go to school, they're able to go back in half a day hybrid. And we weren't even able to do that until the end of January, whereas other districts were able to come back in September. And it shows kind of the disparities that exist in Pennsylvania and its funding formula and how it has been funding school districts for a while, because there are districts. The reason why our district couldn't go back is, it has older buildings. They haven't been able to upgrade their buildings for years and decades. And, there's other districts who have more funding because of the way the funding formula is set. They have more funding and they have been able to have newer buildings. So the air quality, things like ventilation, which you don't think about normally, but really is important in COVID, makes a big difference for these school districts. And so it was a problem before the pandemic. And now it's just really bringing it to light for, I think, the general population to be like, oh, hold on, why can this district go back to school, but this district can't? Oh, they've had all of these underlying issues for so long that we hadn't been paying attention to. I mean, there's folks that have been paying attention to it and screaming it loud, like school board members like myself and other colleagues around the state. But, it's one of those things that have really been glaring during this pandemic.
And I think it speaks a lot to like your cohort of younger and newer leaders, you have not only the life experience, but the professional experience to say, hey, these are issues, we are intimately familiar with these issues, and here are some of the policies and practices we're putting in. And so as we're looking at the school districts, as we're looking at, coming, not necessarily on the other end of the pandemic, but looking at, opening up as a Commonwealth, what are some of the things that you think is going to be very important for council to tackle in the next 6 months?
So I think for us, continuing to move along our path of opening our health department is going to be important. Our goal is to open our own health department by next January. And so we're continuing down that route. I think trying to make sure that we can address the issues, right now we're going through a process of trying to create a county food bank. So that we can better and more centrally distribute food to those who need it and make sure we're hitting the areas that really need it. And so that was one of the things that came out of the pandemic, right? We might not have known that issue was so severe, I think, without the pandemic, but now we are able to act upon it and change policy to make it better for our residents. But also thinking about how folks are going to, we're starting to head into a time where, okay, folks are getting vaccinated, and continuing that push to make sure we're getting to that 80% in Delaware County. But now we're getting to the point where we're trying to get back out there, right? And how are people getting back out there? How are we setting up our programs so that we can help folks economically? So those folks who have been laid off, or what type of programs are we setting up through workforce development to either train individuals to take on a new career or train them to move up in their career, help them get back in the work market. And also, what are we doing for the communities who are close to being, evicted from their homes, or, their mortgages, or those types of programs? How are we using that federal funding to help those individuals who might have housing insecurity issues or haven't been able to pay their utility bills? Some of the funding that's come down through the federal government, we are able to help them with that. So making sure we get that information out to the communities that really need it is really the next step. It's kind of the next frontier. Okay, we are focusing on vaccinations. How do we get to vaccinate the population who hasn't gotten it thus far? And a lot of it is some of an access issue, right? And then the next one is, how do we help people with whether it's job placement, and making sure folks are staying in their homes. I think those are our big three right now.
Yeah, and I think that it's really good that the CARES Act funding is coming down. And so when you're talking about being able to reach people, what are some of the strategies that you're implementing to connect with folks? Because we've seen that, there's been disparities around internet access, telephones, cell phones, and so sometimes even with COVID, we're not necessarily supposed to be going door to door because people are still waiting to get vaccinated. So what are some of the ways that you're able to connect with the community members?
So I think what we've been trying to do. So yes, that's been difficult, right? Because if you don't have internet access, it's almost like, okay, what is going on? And one of the things that we did early on in the pandemic was we actually gave a large portion of our CARES dollars. We gave to our school districts to improve their ability to have students on internet access, basically to get everyone access to the internet, and so that community members could do that. And we also did a program with our libraries so that they could have internet access too, so that more folks in the community were able to access the internet. But one of the other things that we've been doing is we've been trying to reach out to trusted community partners, whether that's our multicultural coalition or our immigrant coalition or the NAACP in the county, or other groups. Even through the process of creating the health department, we've been having listening sessions with various community members just to get their input on where they see the needs are. And so we've been kind of trying to use that model for almost everything we do. and using various ways to get in touch with folks. So whether that's, of course, we're using social media because there's people on social media. We send out emails, we send text messages to tell individuals, and then we use the trusted partners to try and get the message out. Because, every Delco is so fun because it's so different from one part of it to another part of it. And there's different ways of communicating with our community in different parts, right? So, one group, you might be able to say, okay, we're sending it through the Boys and Girls Club, and they have a whole different pocket that they can get the information out to, or we send it through the school district, and the school district sends it out to all their families. So we're trying to do as many different types of communications as we possibly can so that we're hitting the community. It's even, in our vaccine rollout now, we're at the point where we've had these like mass vaccination sites, right? We had like 6 in the county. And, they were all by appointment. Then we changed them to walk-ups so that it made it more accessible. Now we're kind of shifting to less mass vaccination sites, more smaller clinics that are in purposeful places in the county. And those are still walk-up, and we're changing hours to later at night, more weekend hours. But then we're using those trusted partners also to identify, can this church over here do a small pop-up clinic with 150 doses so we can just stop over on a Thursday and say we're going to do vaccines? Can we do that? And so we're setting that up. We have a terminal that's like 69th Street. It's like our big terminal that goes directly into the city. And so that's a high traffic area. So one of the things we're doing is we're going to just pop up there twice a week, and we're going to do vaccines and offer them to anybody who would like it. And so we're trying to think outside the box about how we can access the community, whether that's vaccines or getting them the information about how to apply for rental assistance. It's always evolving. It's like we've learned this year, it's the pivot, right? Like how do we pivot to make sure we're doing what we need to do and addressing the issues, but also reaching the community members?
Yeah, and that seems like Delco's doing a lot of like innovative ways to reach community members where they're at. And I know you talked about earlier with partnering with Chester County. So these partnerships, you seem to be very like intentional about finding people who have that community legitimacy to share that information. How do you see that those partnerships being built upon for the rest of your tenure?
Well, I think that they're just going to blossom because there's so many things that we're doing right now as a county and so many new initiatives that we have that I see those partnerships. This is just the beginning of them, right? It's like, we're not just going to talk to folks one time or, we want their input ongoing. We want to make sure that when, we're building this foundation, especially even for the health department, our health department, we are setting up a health department that's on something called a Health 3.0 model. And so that's really a model of not necessarily the older style of like, we have this big brick and mortar building, please come to us and we can help you. We're trying to have a smaller footprint, like 3 satellite campuses around the county, and then sending our folks out into the community. And so the base that we're building right now, the foundation with the community partners and the various folks we've been talking to through these stakeholder meetings and these listening sessions and think tanks, it's a foundation that the health department can keep moving towards. And so folks will be comfortable with those who are working for the county government through the health department. They'll know them because they've been in their community. They've been out there. They know that they're there to help. And so that's kind of the foundation we're trying to build so that we can make the biggest impact possible when we're implementing programs and clinics or education, whatever it may be, through the health department.
Thank you for that. And one thing we're talking about with reaching people is it's also election season. May 18th is coming up pretty soon. And how is the council trying to make sure people have access to vote, know about information about like not necessarily early voting, but mail-in voting? How has that process been in Delco?
So for us, we have our Board of Elections. And so we're a little bit different because there's some counties. So we have a different home rule charter. And so we have 5 council members versus most counties have 3 commissioners, and those 3 commissioners serve on the Board of Elections. And so we actually don't. None of the council members serve on the Board of Elections. We have one that's the liaison. So, but one of the things that they've been doing is trying to get out the information about last year we were able to set up drop boxes in various municipalities. And so in the municipal government building, or whether it's a library or something like that. So trying to get out information to remind folks that, oh, you can still vote by mail. You can also send it in by mail, but you can also drop it off this drop box that's right down the street. And so we've been trying to get that information out, reminding folks to vote, reminding them that, oh, this year you can everybody can vote in the primary because we have the questions on the ballot this year. And so it's not, it's not oh, you're an independent, you can't come. It's okay, no, you can, and please come, be involved. And trying to remind everybody about that, okay, the whole process is still different, just like it was last year. It's like, okay, because last year was our first time with our mail-in ballots, or not really the first time, but the first time with the amount of mail-in ballots that we had. So reminding everyone about how the process is a little bit different.
And then has that helped a lot with the questions surrounding election integrity? Because no one here in Pennsylvania, there is still a lot of questions, concerns about elections and the safety of mail-in voting. But have you seen that because you're so interested in the community that people are trusting the process a little better?
Yes, I think they are trusting the process a little bit better. I think that last year, the process that we had in place, and I'll give our Board of Elections was amazing, and they that was a tough election. It was we had so many more folks that were voting, which was great than normal, and and of course voting by mail. And so I think through that process, people learned to trust the process because of how transparent we were with it, and where our drop boxes are. They're at municipal buildings. They're watched, they're picked up. How they counted the vote was on people could just watch it all day if they wanted to on camera. So I think just the way the process was built last year really has made it so that folks trust the process going forward.
And then we see with your election is how important it is for people to vote and feel empowered and involved and educated around the issues to make sure that their vote is counted and reflects what they want to see. And so I want to go back to you, because you said at the very top of the hour that when you were sworn in, there was over 100 vacancies, just because people were not necessarily comfortable with what the new council was going to look like. So how has it been trying to hire people, recruit people, again in a pandemic, but these positions have to be filled? So what has that process been like?
Oh, it's been interesting. It's so even to start, we had previously the government, the county government hadn't had a normal or a typical, I guess, HR process. So we didn't post things online. We didn't, put it on Indeed or something of that nature. And so what we kind of did in the beginning was really just revamp that whole process and change it around so that it was more accessible. We've been posting jobs online. We've, worked with hiring firms to make sure that we are getting it out there into as many communities as possible. We are moving forward with a few more initiatives in terms of procurement to make sure that we are getting more diverse individuals in our workforce, but also more diverse individuals who are applying for or submitting proposals for various county contracts, those types of things. And so it's really just been an overhaul, and it has been interesting to do during a pandemic. It was a slow go in the beginning because we were in the middle of this process when the pandemic hit. But now I think we're really up and running. We hired a complete whole new HR team, kind of a new director, a new deputy, that's really focused on recruitment and trying to make sure that we're recruiting wide and far and trying to have a broad range of individuals who we bring in to interview for positions and hire. And so that has been it has been interesting over the year and has been a lot, but I think, it was, as I said before, it was kind of baptism by fire. And so it was kind of it was hard in the beginning because we had so many empty spots. But I think that was I think it ended up being better overall for where we're moving towards as a county government.
So like a little bit of a silver lining.
Yes.
And I guess like you said, you're recruiting, you're being able to change things. Have you noticed like in the area that more people are getting on board with some of the changes that the council is making, and they're like, okay, this is not as different as I thought it was like going to be? Because sometimes like the fear of the unknown creates a lot of the backlash.
Yes, I do. I think that was it. I think that there was a fear of the unknown, and a lot of folks just like, okay, we're leaving. We're out. I could retire. I might as well retire. I don't want to change or whatever it was. But, and I think that the folks who are still there are really getting on board with I think they see like how it benefits our community and how we can really make some impactful changes in how our county government was operating and how it should be operating in the future and how we can help the county more. So I think folks are on board now.
I guess that makes it less stressful. And you're a professor. You're a doctor. You could have took any type of career path, but you came to like serve your community. And so, what was that transition like for you? And how did you decide? You know what? I'm invested in my community. I'm going to do this work, and I'm going to be a public servant.
Yes. I had this whole vision in my head of like what, the best laid plans, right? I had this vision that I was going to be a college dean by the age of 40, right? And then, I got involved in politics, but really it was more to get involved in my community and really try to help wherever I could. And and then who knows what it's going to look like in the future, but I love what I'm doing right now. I mean, I'm still a professor because county council technically counts as part-time. So I'm still a professor. I still run an undergraduate program at the University of Sciences. And, this work that we're doing, it's so rewarding. That's why I love working with my community and changing, how it's operating and trying to make it the best fit that it possibly can be for our community members and figuring out ways that we can help them. And the goal is to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to live a happy and healthy and successful life. And whether that's implementing more workforce development programs or building a county health department or deprivatizing the prison, all of this makes a huge impact on the everyday lives of our residents. Even if they don't realize it, it does. And so that's really what it is for me. I enjoy it. It's been crazy, stressful this whole year, right? We're in a pandemic. We have 565,000 residents who, depend on us for all of the COVID response. And so this has been stressful, but it has also been so rewarding because we have been able to, those who are working for us in Department of Emergency Services and our intercommunity health and various other partners throughout the county have all kind of come together to make it all work and provide what they needed to do for the county. I mean, a great example of how our county works is, we have something called our Citizens Corps and Medical Reserve Corps, and it's a massive network of volunteers. And we would not be able to do our vaccine clinics or our testing or our food drives or any of that without them. And they have they're all residents of Delaware County. We have over 3,000 of them. We have them working, I think in this year alone, 2021, they've worked over 11,000 hours. So it's crazy. And so, just that's just an example of Delco being Delco and showing up when needed. And that's what I love about it.
And you talk a lot about like all the various community members, but you mentioned a couple of times like the prison, and we know for a lot of, especially here in Pennsylvania, that is where a lot of the COVID hotspots were, people who were detained. And so, what does it look like, to get this prison either removed from Delco, or to have it not be privatized? Like, what is some of the things that county is looking at in regards to the prison?
So right now we're going through a process of, so we had I guess we went through an RFP process for consultants to come in to see, what would it take for us to deprivatize the prison, and what would that cost? Would it be an increased cost to taxpayers? Would it not be? And so right now we're at the point where we chose someone to do that study. They're in the middle of the study. They had a preliminary report that came out to us about a month ago. And they talked about kind of the benefits of deprivatizing the prison, and, how much it would cost for us to do so, and, on the short term, and then also ongoing. And, that's kind of where we are in the process. And the goal is that council will make the final decision of whether to deprivatize or not this summer, and then move forward with the process, and hoping that by this time next year, the prison would be under county control.
And so, what are some of the processes and the procedures county is looking at, just to make sure that the safety of people who are working at the prison, the people who are detained at the prison, is going to be a priority, because we know a lot of times local jails are some of the places where people are most harmed during incarceration. So what are some of the things that you are looking at in addition to this RFP process for Wayne County? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So actually with the group that we chose, they are also looking at different programs that we can implement that we don't have currently in the way that we in our private entity prison that we have, implementing more programs around substance use and job workforce development programs, GED programs, trying to figure out how we can best, serve those individuals who are in the prison, so that when they come out, they can, contribute to society in a different way than they had been previously. And so those are looking at what we can do with those programs, and then also what we are going to do, because with staffing. So thinking about it in terms of, right now everything is privately run. We have no employees over there. I think there may be less than 10 county employees at the prison right now. And so we would be taking over the whole operations and bringing those employees underneath the county wing, and looking at how we would do that, looking at how we would improve the programs and do all of that at the same time. And, just knowing that for my own personal perspective, just understanding that for me, it's, having a model where you're making money off of individuals being placed in prison is just not, it's morally wrong to me. And, that's something that we need to change. And that's why our goal is to try and go towards a more, a safer prison, a prison that's providing more resources for our inmates and for those who are working there and serving those inmates, and, moving more towards that, moving to that county control model. And we know that the surrounding counties are doing it much more efficiently and at a much less cost, having the prison run by the county versus having the prison run by a private entity. And, the county doesn't have the incentive that a private entity has to keep individuals in, or, not decrease the recidivism rate, which as our council has put forth, that is our goal, is to, help individuals so that they aren't back in the prison and that they have other options when they leave.
Yeah, it seems like y'all have like a really, community-based, justice-based, mandate that you're trying to implement, and it's very interesting to watch and see how successful and supported that y'all are. So I do wish you, all the best of luck in the future. And our last question is a question I ask every panelist, every person who comes on the show is, what are some of the things that are bringing you joy? Because as in politics, it's very stressful. You deal with the best and the worst of people and communities and systems. So what are some of the things that are bringing you joy?
I guess, I love being out there in what we're doing. So right now, I think, well, let's say, now the lines at the vaccine clinics have slowed down a bit, but, like 3 weeks ago when there was like people lined up and they were just so happy that they were getting a vaccine and like seeing folks and volunteering at those vaccine clinics and helping people get the vaccine has just been, that's fun. That's fun to me. Or being at some of our, like this Saturday, we have a food drive. Being at the food drive and like helping individuals, whether that's, getting them a food box or the people who are coming to donate food. It's, it's just, I think doing that and being out there, and that brings me joy. And my baby is also the creating the health department. So I have several meetings a week of that, and that is also fun.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Taylor, for the Sunday Night Sit Down. We wish you all the best as the Vice President of the Delco County Council. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today. This was great.
Yeah, come back. Listen, email us. Come back anytime. Anytime stuff happens, we're very excited, and a lot of the initiatives that you're taking up in Delaware, in Delco is very important, and I think it's going to help like the whole Commonwealth move forward. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Yes, thank you, and I look forward to coming back on the show.
Bye. And with that, that is the end of our Sunday Night Sit Down with Dr. Monica Taylor. You can follow up with her. You can follow what's going on in Delco, reaching out to them on social media or visiting the Delco County websites for their meetings and events. For those of you who are watching, we know the election's in a couple of days. So if you haven't already dropped off your mail-in ballot, please remember you can take your mail-in ballot to the Board of Elections or take it to your polling place and submit it there. If you have a ballot, you must send it in. And if you have thrown it away or if you forget it, you can only vote by a provisional ballot. So if you have a mail-in ballot, please make sure that you fill it out and drop it in the mail at your local Board of Elections or at one of the drop boxes. Please do not throw it away and throw away your vote. Coming up this week, we are going to, on the Power Hour, be discussing the elections and what races to look out for and discussing some predictions on what Black Pittsburgh needs to know. We'll be talking about different policy initiatives and what this election could mean for people with the changes and the possibilities. That's going to be Tuesday at 2. For Wednesday at 6 p.m., you know nothing ever changes for this week in white supremacy. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And in addition, for Thursday, we have on Tilt, the state of Black mental health and policing in America with Julius Boatwright and Mama Brown. That's going to be Thursday at noon. And also, of course, we're going to be having Ask a Black Doctor. We're going to be talking about COVID-19 and changes and vaccines and what does it mean for like you and your family and your friends as we're doing this reopening, as we're being out and about in the community. So please make sure you're tuned into the One Hood Media Network. We have programming for you all the time and a couple of surprises coming your way. So with that, we hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Sunday Night Sit Down.